Dr. Elias Hart adjusted the visor of his environmental suit, a small bead of sweat running down his temple as he stared at the holographic map floating in front of him. It flickered every so often, thanks to the dense magnetic interference in the atmosphere of Artraxia. The planet was beautiful, no doubt about that, otherworldly, even by galactic standards, but it was also annoyingly unpredictable. A jungle canopy of crystalline trees stretched above him, their iridescent branches refracting the sunlight into a dizzying kaleidoscope of colors. Below his boots, the ground pulsed faintly, with what Elias could only describe as life. The research brief hadn't mentioned that the soil might occasionally hum ominously, but here he was, second-guessing every step. "Don't worry, Hart," he muttered to himself, his voice tinny inside his helmet. "It's just a sentient forest that probably isn't hungry." Elias had come to Artraxia as part of an interstellar research delegation, though his colleagues were scattered across the planet's surface, studying its various ecosystems. His assignment was relatively straightforward: catalog the planet's unique flora and analyze the peculiar magnetic storms that occasionally swept across its surface. Simple, quiet, solitary, just the way he liked it. But as he trudged deeper into the crystalline forest, something began to feel off. The trees seemed to lean toward him, their translucent leaves tinkling like wind chimes, despite the absence of any wind. The soil beneath his boots shifted subtly, as if guiding him. Elias stopped and scanned the area with his handheld spectrometer, muttering, "If this is a trap, I hope it's at least polite enough to introduce itself first." The spectrometer beeped. A faint energy signature appeared on the screen, indicating a nearby source of motion. A large creature, perhaps? Elias gripped his tranquilizer gun, though he doubted it would do much against anything larger than a particularly bold squirrel. Then he saw her. At first, Elias thought she was just another part of the forest, a humanoid figure seemingly made of the same crystalline material as the trees. But then she moved, stepping out from behind one of the massive trunks with a fluid grace that made his breath hitch. Her skin shimmered in the sunlight, a pearlescent glow that shifted colors as she moved. Her hair, or what he assumed was hair, was a cascade of fine tendrils that swayed faintly, as if reacting to his presence. "Oh, great," Elias said under his breath. "My first alien encounter, and I look like a sweaty idiot in a glorified fishbowl." The alien woman tilted her head, her large luminous eyes narrowing as if she'd heard him. She raised a hand, and Elias tensed, wondering if this was the part where he got vaporized. Instead, she pointed behind him and said something in a lilting, musical language he couldn't understand. "What?" Elias turned, and his heart skipped a beat. A plant, a massive carnivorous-looking plant, was creeping toward him. Its petals, lined with razor-sharp spines, quivered in anticipation. He stumbled backward, fumbling for his tranquilizer gun, but before he could aim, the alien woman stepped forward. With a casual wave of her hand, a pulse of energy shot out, and the plant recoiled, wilting dramatically as though offended. Elias stared. "Okay, that's impressive. Remind me to never get on your bad side." The woman frowned, her tendrils twitching, then gestured for him to follow. Elias hesitated. He'd read enough first-contact horror stories to know how badly this could end. But then again, she had just saved his life. Taking a deep breath, he nodded and followed her through the forest. They arrived at a village unlike anything Elias had ever seen. The structures were a blend of natural and artificial, as if the crystalline trees themselves had been coaxed into growing into elegant domes and spires. Bioluminescent vines snaked along the walls, casting the village in a soft, ethereal glow. The alien woman led him to a central structure where a group of her kind awaited. They were taller and more diverse in appearance than Elias had anticipated, each adorned with intricate patterns that glimmered like living tattoos. He couldn't tell if the markings were natural or some form of decoration, but they were mesmerizing. Hi," Elias said, raising a hand in an awkward wave. "I come in peace and all that jazz." The group murmured amongst themselves, their voices harmonizing in a way that made Elias feel like he was listening to an alien symphony. Finally, an older alien stepped forward, her presence commanding, her tendrils swaying with an air of authority. She said something in their language, and Elias could only shrug helplessly. The woman he'd met in the forest stepped forward, her voice calm and measured as she seemed to translate for him. With a sigh, Elias activated his communicator, letting it scan and decode their language. The device crackled, then sputtered out a rough approximation of their words. "Welcome, off-worlder. You have entered our sacred domain. We offer you hospitality and gratitude for your courage." Elias raised an eyebrow. "Courage? I think you've got the wrong guy. I'm just a nerd with a datapad and a lousy sense of direction." The translator crackled again, relaying a garbled version of his words to the group. To his surprise, they laughed, a deep, resonant sound that made Elias feel slightly less like he was about to be sacrificed to a crystal god. As the evening wore on, Elias found himself sitting at a long, crystalline table in the village's communal hall. The alien woman, whose name he learned was Lyra, sat beside him, quietly explaining the intricacies of their culture. She had a dry wit that caught him off guard, making him laugh despite his nerves. When one of the villagers offered him a gelatinous dish that jiggled ominously, Lyra smirked and said, "It's not poisonous. Probably." Elias stared at the dish, then back at her. "You're really selling it." Lyra chuckled, a sound like chimes in the wind, and Elias found himself relaxing for the first time since he'd landed on the planet. Whatever chaos lay ahead, at least he wasn't facing it alone. As the village lights dimmed and the crystalline walls began to hum faintly, Elias couldn't shake the feeling that his mission was about to take a very strange turn. He just didn't realize how strange yet. Elias' heart awoke to the soft hum of Artraxian morning, a gentle vibration that seemed to emanate from the crystalline walls of his temporary quarters. It wasn't the kind of hum you could easily ignore. No, this hum had a personality. It pulsed in irregular patterns, almost as if the walls were trying to have a conversation with him. "I get it," Elias muttered groggily, swinging his legs off the strange, jelly-like sleeping platform the villagers had given him. "You're alive, you're mysterious, and you really want me to wake up." Message received. The room itself was as alien as the rest of the village, with walls that shimmered faintly, casting a soft rainbow glow. Furniture seemed optional, with most surfaces growing organically from the floor. He spotted a basin of water that wasn't water. It rippled like liquid mercury but smelled faintly of citrus. Elias splashed some of it on his face, hoping it wasn't corrosive, and felt instantly refreshed. As he tugged on his boots, a knock, or rather a series of musical chimes, sounded at the door. Before he could respond, the door melted open, revealing Lyra standing in the entryway. Her tendrils swayed slightly, catching the light like strands of living opal. "Good morning, Earthman," she said, a playful lilt in her voice. "Did the walls keep you up with their singing?" Elias smirked, his sleep-addled brain managing a dry retort. "No, but I think they're auditioning for a reality show. They're a little off-key." Lyra's laugh was light but genuine. "You'll get used to it, or you won't. Either way, the council has summoned you." "Summoned me?" Elias asked, standing and brushing off his suit. "What for? Did I accidentally insult the sacred soup last night?" Lyra tilted her head, her expression unreadable, but her tone tinged with amusement. "You'll find out soon enough. Come on, they don't like to be kept waiting." Elias followed Lyra through the village, marveling again at its blend of natural beauty and advanced technology. Bioluminescent pathways lit up under their feet, guiding them toward the central council chamber. The air smelled faintly of something sweet and metallic, a scent Elias was quickly learning to associate with Artraxia. As they approached the chamber, Elias noticed several villagers watching him. Their expressions weren't hostile, but there was a palpable curiosity in their luminous eyes. A group of children giggled as he passed, pointing at his boots and whispering in their melodic language. "They think your feet are funny," Lyra explained, not bothering to hide her smirk. Well, tell them they're not exactly model citizens of normal themselves, Elias shot back, though his tone was light. The council chamber was the largest structure in the village, a dome that seemed to pulse with its own internal light. As Elias stepped inside, he was struck by the acoustics. Every sound, from the rustle of clothing to the faint hum of the walls, seemed amplified yet harmonious. Seated in a semicircle were the council members, including Lyra's parents. Her father, tall and imposing with a presence that demanded respect, greeted Elias with a deep nod. Her mother, equally formidable but with a sharper edge to her gaze, studied him as if she were deciding whether he was worth the effort of speaking to. "Dr. Hart," Lyra's father began, his voice resonant and warm, "we welcome you to our home." Elias offered a polite nod, trying to mask his nervousness. "Thank you, it's an honor to be here, though if I may ask, why have I been summoned?" The council exchanged glances, a silent conversation passing between them. Finally, Lyra's mother spoke. "We have deliberated and reached a decision. Your arrival here is no coincidence. It is a sign." Elias blinked. "A sign of what?" The elder beside Lyra's mother leaned forward, her crystalline tattoos catching the light. "Of a union, between your world and ours." For a moment, Elias wasn't sure he'd heard correctly. He glanced at Lyra, whose tendrils had gone stiff with what he assumed was embarrassment or horror. "Wait," Elias said, holding up a hand. "Are you saying—" Her father's smile widened. "You shall marry our daughter, Lyra. It is the will of the village." Elias's mind raced. This had to be some kind of prank, maybe an elaborate alien hazing ritual. He glanced at Lyra again, hoping for clarification, but she looked as bewildered as he felt. I think there's been a misunderstanding," Elias stammered. "I'm not exactly marriage material. And besides, I'm here for research, not romance." The council members tilted their heads in unison, their glowing eyes reflecting faint amusement. "It is not merely a matter of romance," Lyra's mother said. "You bring genetic diversity to our people. Your presence ensures the vitality of future generations." Elias pinched the bridge of his nose, trying to process what he was hearing. "Okay, but I'm pretty sure there are protocols for this sort of thing. Forms to fill out. Maybe a first date?" Lyra, finally finding her voice, crossed her arms. "This is ridiculous. I didn't agree to this either." Her father frowned. "It is a matter of honor, Lyra. The council has spoken." "Well, the council can unspeak," Lyra shot back. Elias, despite the absurdity of the situation, couldn't help but admire her defiance. "Look," he said, trying to keep his tone diplomatic. "I appreciate the offer. Really, I do. But this feels a little rushed. Maybe we could revisit this idea after I've had a chance to, not panic." The council members murmured among themselves, their tones a mix of confusion and amusement. Lyra's father finally nodded. "Very well. You may take time to consider, but know this. The village's expectations are clear. To refuse would be—" He paused, searching for the right word. "Unfortunate." Elias sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Yeah, that's not ominous at all." As they left the chamber, Elias turned to Lyra. "So, that happened." Lyra rolled her eyes, her tendrils twitching in irritation. "Welcome to my world, Earthman. My family has a talent for meddling." Elias chuckled despite himself. "If it's any consolation, you're not exactly my type either." Lyra smirked. "Good. Then we're in agreement. No wedding." "Agreed," Elias said, though the weight of the council's words still hung heavily over him. He couldn't shake the feeling that his peaceful mission had just been turned on its head, and that things were about to get a whole lot stranger. Elias had expected a lot of things on his journey to Artraxia: alien flora that glowed like neon street signs, strange weather patterns that played havoc with his instruments, maybe even the occasional run-in with a hostile species. But he had not expected to be the unwilling star of what he could only describe as intergalactic bachelor meets arranged marriage nightmare. Lyra walked briskly ahead of him, her tendrils swaying in sharp, irritated movements that mirrored her mood. "I can't believe this," she muttered, though whether she was speaking to Elias or herself wasn't entirely clear. "Trust me," Elias said, keeping pace. "I'm just as thrilled as you are. My life plan did not include become alien son-in-law." Lyra shot him a look over her shoulder. "I told them I wasn't ready for this. I thought I'd have more time. But no, suddenly, the council decides you're the answer to some cryptic prophecy about outsiders and gene pools." "Prophecies, huh?" Elias said, raising an eyebrow. "That's not ominous at all. What's next? They hand me a glowing sword and tell me to fight a dragon." Lyra smirked despite herself. "We don't have dragons, but there's a carnivorous moss patch a few kilometers north that might take a shine to you." "Noted," Elias replied, grinning. "I'll make sure to pack a flamethrower." The village was unusually lively that day, with villagers bustling about, decorating the central square with ribbons of glowing material that looked like liquid light. Bioluminescent orbs floated in the air, their movements synchronized as though choreographed. Elias couldn't help but admire the display, even as a sinking feeling settled in his stomach. "What's all this?" he asked, gesturing to the decorations. Lyra groaned. "A courtship festival. The council thinks it's the perfect opportunity for us to bond." Elias stopped walking. "Wait, they're throwing us an alien engagement party? Are you kidding me?" "I wish I were," Lyra muttered, pulling him along before he could protest further. As the day wore on, Elias found himself dragged into what the villagers cheerfully described as preparations. He was given an outfit made of shimmering fabric that shifted colors with every movement. It was both mesmerizing and slightly disorienting. "You look ridiculous," Lyra said when she saw him, her lips twitching in a barely concealed smile. "Speak for yourself," Elias shot back, gesturing to her own outfit, a flowing garment adorned with what looked like miniature constellations that twinkled as she moved. "You're practically a walking disco ball." She raised an eyebrow. "Better a disco ball than whatever that is. You look like a sentient mood ring." Despite himself, Elias laughed. "Okay, fair point." The festival began with what the villagers called the trials, which, according to Lyra, were meant to prove the compatibility of potential mates. "Oh, great," Elias said as he and Lyra stood before a large crowd of villagers. "What kind of trials are we talking about? Trivia questions? A trust fall?" Lyra gave him a sly look. "You'll see." The first trial involved what Elias could only describe as dancing, though the Artraxian version was less about rhythm and more about precise, synchronized movements. The goal, Lyra explained, was to demonstrate harmony. "Just follow my lead," she said, her tone exasperated but resigned. Elias tried his best, mimicking Lyra's fluid, deliberate movements, but his human joints weren't made for the intricate twists and turns, and he quickly found himself flailing. At one point, he accidentally spun too hard, knocking over a floating orb that promptly exploded into a puff of glittering dust. The crowd erupted into laughter. Lyra sighed. "Well, that was memorable." "Hey, I'm just adding a little flair," Elias said, brushing the dust off his suit. The second trial was a test of communication, involving a bioluminescent plant that emitted pulses of light in rhythmic patterns. The task was to respond with matching patterns using handheld devices. "This is more my speed," Elias said, taking the device and studying the plant. To his surprise, he quickly got the hang of it, matching the plant's rhythms with precision. Lyra, on the other hand, struggled, her responses slightly off-tempo. "Looks like I've got the upper hand," Elias teased, earning a sharp glare from Lyra. "Don't get cocky, Earthman," she muttered. By the end of the trial, Elias had impressed the crowd, earning a round of applause. Lyra, though begrudging, offered a small nod of approval. The final trial was the strangest of all, a shared mental link facilitated by a device the villagers called the crystalline nexus. Lyra explained that it would create a temporary telepathic bond, allowing them to experience each other's thoughts and emotions. "This is safe, right?" Elias asked nervously as the device was placed on his head. Lyra shrugged. "Mostly. Just don't think about anything embarrassing." "Great advice," Elias said dryly. "Now all I can think about is that time I got stuck in a vending machine at the spaceport." Before Lyra could respond, the device activated. For a brief moment, Elias felt a rush of sensations, colors, sounds, and emotions that weren't his own. He saw flashes of Lyra's memories, her childhood in the village, her frustration with the council's meddling, and even a fleeting moment of amusement at his awkwardness. Lyra, meanwhile, seemed startled. You're afraid of spiders?" "They have too many legs," Elias muttered defensively. The experience was overwhelming, but oddly intimate. When the connection ended, they both stood in silence for a moment, unsure of what to say. As the festival wound down, Elias and Lyra sat at the edge of the village, watching the bioluminescent lights fade into the night. "Well," Elias said, breaking the silence, "that was something." Lyra smirked. "You survived. Barely." "Thanks for the vote of confidence," Elias replied. They sat in companionable silence for a while, the tension between them easing. Despite the absurdity of the situation, Elias couldn't help but feel a growing sense of camaraderie with Lyra. "Do you think they'll back off after this?" he asked. Lyra shrugged. "Probably not, but we'll figure something out." Elias nodded, feeling a spark of hope. Whatever challenges lay ahead, at least he wasn't facing them alone. Elias sat cross-legged on the village's central platform, staring at a tray of what the locals had assured him was food. If it was food, it was unlike anything he'd seen before. The platter glistened with a rainbow of slimy textures, like someone had weaponized a fruit salad. "What is this?" he asked Lyra, who was perched elegantly beside him, nibbling on something resembling a translucent pancake. Lyra tilted her head, her expression caught somewhere between amusement and pity. "It's a delicacy. We call it trathan. It's made from fermented river blossoms." "Fermented?" Elias asked, poking at the dish with his fork. It wobbled ominously. "That explains why it smells like a gym bag." Lyra rolled her eyes. "Just eat it. You'll insult the host if you don't." "Fine," Elias said, steeling himself. He scooped up a small bite and popped it into his mouth. The texture was an unholy combination of slime and grit, and the flavor was a confusing blend of sweet, sour, and something vaguely metallic. "Wow," he said, struggling to swallow. "That's an experience." Lyra chuckled, her tendrils swaying with mirth. "You'll live. Probably." Their meal was interrupted by a commotion near the village's outer boundary. Villagers were rushing toward the source of the noise, their glowing robes creating a cascade of light as they moved. "What's going on?" Elias asked, rising to his feet. Lyra frowned. "Let's find out." They followed the crowd to a clearing where a large piece of machinery sat smoking. Elias recognized it immediately. It was one of his survey drones, the sleek metallic surface now marred by scorch marks. "What happened?" Elias demanded, stepping forward to inspect the damage. One of the villagers, a wiry figure with bright green tattoos that pulsed faintly, pointed to a patch of ground near the drone. "Sabotage," they said, their tone grim. Elias crouched down, examining the evidence. A crude explosive device lay in the dirt, its components scattered from the blast. He glanced up at Lyra. "Any idea who would want to blow up my stuff?" Lyra crossed her arms, her expression serious. "Not everyone in the village is thrilled about your presence. Some believe your arrival disrupts the balance of our community." "Great," Elias muttered, running a hand through his hair. "So now I'm not just an unwanted suitor. I'm also a walking political crisis." Lyra sighed. "It's not that simple. There's an old faction that opposes any contact with outsiders. They think you're a threat to our traditions." "Well, they're not wrong about that," Elias said, gesturing to the smoking drone. Tradition didn't include fireworks before I got here. Elias spent the rest of the afternoon repairing the drone, with Lyra keeping watch for any additional sabotage attempts. As he worked, he couldn't help but notice her growing frustration. "Everything okay?" he asked, tightening a loose wire. Lyra hesitated before answering. "It's just, this whole situation is a mess. The council's decision, the festival, now this. I feel like I'm caught between my family and my own life." Elias nodded. "I get it. Believe me, I didn't sign up for any of this either. I was supposed to be collecting soil samples, not dodging matchmaking councils and bombs." Lyra gave a small smile. "You're handling it better than I expected." "Thanks, I think," Elias said, testing the drone's power core. It hummed faintly, a promising sign. "You know, if this whole research gig doesn't work out, maybe I'll start a reality show. Human versus alien culture shock." Lyra laughed, the sound lightening the tension between them. "I'd watch that." That evening, the council called another meeting, this time to address the sabotage. The villagers gathered in the central chamber, their glowing eyes reflecting a mixture of concern and curiosity. Elias stood near the back, trying to blend in, a futile effort given his distinctly non-glowing appearance. Lyra stood beside him, her posture stiff. "We cannot ignore this act of aggression," Lyra's father declared, his voice resonating through the chamber. "It threatens not only our guest, but the harmony of our village." A murmur ran through the crowd, some voices agreeing while others grumbled in dissent. One villager stepped forward, their tattoos dim with age. "Perhaps this is a sign. The outsider's presence has brought discord. We should reconsider his role here." Elias resisted the urge to roll his eyes. "For the record," he said, stepping forward, "I didn't exactly parachute in here with a plan to ruin anyone's day. I'm just trying to do my job without getting married or blown up." A ripple of laughter moved through the crowd, and even Lyra's father's stern expression softened slightly. Lyra spoke up, her voice steady. "Elias isn't the problem. Fear of change is. Blaming him for the actions of a few is short-sighted." Her words seemed to resonate with some of the villagers, though others still looked skeptical. After the meeting, Elias and Lyra walked back to the outskirts of the village, where the air was quieter and the bioluminescent lights dimmed. "You didn't have to defend me back there," Elias said. Lyra shrugged. "Someone had to. Besides, you're not the worst outsider I've ever met." "High praise," Elias said with a grin. As they approached Elias's quarters, Lyra hesitated. "Look, I know this isn't easy for you, but for what it's worth, I think you're handling it better than most people would." "Thanks," Elias said, genuinely touched. "And for what it's worth, I think you're pretty great at making the best of a bad situation." Lyra smirked. "Don't get used to the compliments, Earthman." "Wouldn't dream of it," Elias replied, watching as she disappeared into the night. Despite the day's chaos, Elias felt a small flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, he and Lyra could navigate this mess together. Elias woke to the sound of something heavy knocking against the side of his makeshift quarters. He groaned, rolling over on the surprisingly comfortable mattress crafted from alien moss, and peered out the circular window. Outside, Lyra was standing with arms crossed, her expression a mix of exasperation and impatience. Beside her was a creature resembling a cross between a yak and a jellyfish, its translucent tendrils draped over what looked like a cart. "Morning, Earthman," Lyra called. "Get dressed. We have a problem." Elias squinted at her. "We always have a problem. Can it wait until I've had some coffee?" "No," Lyra said flatly. "The council has decided we need to prove our compatibility. Again." "Of course they have," Elias muttered, pulling on his boots. Because clearly a sabotage drone and a near miss with alien cuisine weren't enough excitement for 1 week. And the village square was buzzing with activity when they arrived. Villagers lined the perimeter, chatting excitedly as council members set up an elaborate stage adorned with floating holograms. "What's this about?" Elias asked, eyeing the stage warily. Lyra sighed. "The council has decreed that we must undertake the trial of accord. It's an ancient custom meant to test the bond between partners. They think it'll reassure the skeptics." "Great," Elias said, his sarcasm palpable. "And what does this trial involve? A three-legged race? Pictionary?" "Worse," Lyra said, her expression grim. "It's a series of challenges designed to test trust, cooperation, and adaptability." Elias frowned. "Define adaptability." Lyra hesitated. "Let's just say it's not for the faint of heart." The first challenge was deceptively simple. They were led to a platform suspended over a shallow pool of glowing liquid, with a series of stones floating precariously on the surface. "The objective," one of the council members explained, "is to cross the pool together without falling in. The stones are stable only when two individuals step on them simultaneously." "Piece of cake," Elias said, stepping onto the first stone. It immediately wobbled, nearly throwing him off balance. "Cake made of quicksand, maybe," Lyra muttered, joining him. They quickly discovered that timing was everything. After several false starts, and one particularly embarrassing moment where Elias flailed like a windmill, they found a rhythm. "You're heavier than you look," Lyra commented as they reached the halfway point. "Thanks for that," Elias replied. "And you're surprisingly good at not laughing while I make a fool of myself." "I'm saving it for later," she said, smirking. By the time they reached the other side, the crowd was cheering. Elias couldn't tell if it was out of admiration or sheer amusement, but he gave a mock bow anyway. The second challenge was more cerebral. They were placed in a small chamber with walls covered in shifting patterns of light. In the center of the room was a pedestal with a complex puzzle made of interlocking rings. "Let me guess," Elias said, examining the puzzle. "This is one of those teamwork makes the dream work scenarios." Lyra nodded. "The rings are designed to move only when both of us work in perfect synchronization." "Perfect synchronization? No pressure," Elias said, cracking his knuckles. The puzzle was maddeningly intricate. Every time one of them moved a ring, the other shifted unpredictably. It quickly became clear that brute force wouldn't work. "Stop pulling so hard," Lyra said, her tone sharp. "I'm not pulling," Elias shot back. "I'm applying strategic pressure." "Strategic pressure is going to break it," Lyra snapped. "Fine," Elias said, throwing up his hands. "You lead, and I'll follow." To his surprise, Lyra's strategy worked. By focusing on subtle movements and communicating clearly, they managed to align the rings into a cohesive pattern. The pedestal emitted a soft hum, and the lights on the walls turned green. "See?" Lyra said, giving him a triumphant look. "Not so hard when you listen to me." Elias grinned. "I'll admit it. You're the brains of this operation." The final challenge took them to the outskirts of the village, where a series of massive pillars loomed against the sky. Each pillar was engraved with alien symbols that glowed faintly. "The trial of accord concludes here," a council member announced. "You must decipher the sequence of symbols to activate the beacon at the top." "Of course," Elias muttered, "because climbing ancient alien monuments is exactly how I wanted to spend my day." Lyra gave him a wry smile. "At least it's not carnivorous moss." The climb was grueling, each symbol requiring careful analysis to determine the correct sequence. Elias relied on his scientific training, while Lyra's familiarity with her culture's symbology provided crucial insights. "Does this look like a constellation to you?" Elias asked, pointing to one symbol. Lyra frowned. "It could be. Try aligning it with that one over there." As they worked together, the tension between them eased, replaced by a growing sense of camaraderie. "I have to admit," Lyra said as they reached the top, "you're not as useless as I thought." "High praise," Elias said, laughing. They activated the final beacon, which emitted a beam of light that shot into the sky, illuminating the entire village. The crowd erupted into cheers, and Elias felt a surprising sense of accomplishment. That evening, Elias and Lyra found themselves back at the edge of the village, watching the stars. "Well," Elias said, "I think we make a pretty good team." Lyra nodded. "We do," which is surprising, given the circumstances. Elias smirked. "Admit it. You're starting to like me." "Don't push your luck, Earthman," Lyra said, though her tone was more teasing than serious. As they sat in silence, the weight of the day's challenges began to lift. For the first time since arriving on Artraxia, Elias felt like he might actually belong, if only a little. "Thanks for not letting me drown, by the way," he said, breaking the silence. Lyra chuckled. "Any time." Elias smiled, his gaze fixed on the stars. Maybe this crazy situation wasn't so bad after all. Elias was roused from a rare dreamless sleep by the unmistakable sound of someone, or something, hammering on the outer hull of his quarters. He sat up groggily, still half tangled in his blanket, as the noise grew louder. "Elias!" Lyra's voice cut through the din. "Wake up! My mother wants to see you. Now!" He rubbed his face, trying to make sense of her words. "Your mother?" "Yes," Lyra replied, peering through the window with an exasperated expression. "And believe me, keeping her waiting is not a good idea." "I thought your dad was scary enough," Elias muttered, pulling on his boots. "Does this family have a handbook on intimidating outsiders?" Lyra smirked. "Let's just say she's thorough." The meeting place was a garden on the outskirts of the village, a serene space where crystalline flowers swayed gently in a non-existent breeze. Despite the beauty of the surroundings, Elias's stomach churned with nerves. Lyra's mother, matriarch Nara, stood waiting for them, her tall, elegant figure framed by the shimmering petals. Her robes, made of woven bioluminescent threads, seemed to shift colors with her every movement. Her piercing gaze landed on Elias as he approached, and he suddenly understood why Lyra had insisted on punctuality. "Elias," Nara said, her voice a blend of authority and curiosity. "You have caused quite a stir in our village." He gave a nervous laugh. "Yeah, I seem to have a knack for that." Nara arched an eyebrow. "And yet you persist. I admire your resilience, even if I question your motives." "Motives?" Elias echoed. "Look, I didn't come here to disrupt anything. I just wanted to conduct research, maybe write a paper that no one outside my field would read. The whole marriage thing was an unexpected twist." Nara's lips twitched, almost imperceptibly. "Unexpected, perhaps, but not unwelcome." Elias hesitated, glancing at Lyra, who stood nearby with her arms crossed, pretending to be indifferent. "I'm still figuring that out," he admitted. Nara nodded, as if this answer was acceptable. For now. "Very well. There is something I wish to show you." Elias followed Nara and Lyra deeper into the garden, where the flowers grew denser and their colors more vibrant. Eventually, they reached a clearing where a strange obelisk-like structure rose from the ground. It pulsed faintly, the light within shifting in rhythm with an inaudible hum. "What is it?" Elias asked, approaching the obelisk cautiously. Nara's expression softened, a rare hint of emotion breaking through her composed exterior. "This is the heart of Artraxia. It is both a relic and a living entity, central to our people's history and well-being." Elias reached out to touch the surface but hesitated, glancing at Nara. "May I?" She nodded, and as his fingers brushed the obelisk, a wave of warmth spread through him. Images and sensations flooded his mind, glimpses of alien landscapes, fragments of history, and a profound sense of interconnectedness. "It's incredible," he said, his voice barely a whisper. Nara watched him intently. "The heart has accepted you. That is no small thing." "Accepted me?" Elias asked, stepping back. "What does that mean?" "It means," Nara said, "that you are now part of our story. Whether you choose to embrace it or not is up to you." As they walked back toward the village, Elias couldn't shake the weight of Nara's words, or the lingering warmth of the heart's energy. "Your mom's intense," he said to Lyra, trying to lighten the mood. Lyra snorted. "You have no idea. She once convinced an entire council to reverse their decision with a single speech." Elias whistled. "Remind me never to argue with her." "Wise choice," Lyra said, a faint smile tugging at her lips. Later that evening, Elias found himself at the village's central hub, where the locals had gathered for an impromptu celebration. Tables were laden with an array of alien dishes, some of which Elias recognized from his previous culinary adventures, and others that looked even more questionable. "Try this," Lyra said, handing him a small, brightly colored sphere. "What is it?" he asked, eyeing it suspiciously. "Just eat it," she said, rolling her eyes. He popped it into his mouth, bracing for the worst. To his surprise, it tasted like a mix of mango and caramel, with a hint of spice. "Not bad," he admitted. "See? You're learning," Lyra said, her tone teasing. As the night wore on, Elias found himself relaxing for the first time in days. The villagers seemed more welcoming, the tension of recent events giving way to laughter and music. At one point, a group of children approached him, their glowing eyes wide with curiosity. "Is it true you come from a planet with no glow?" one of them asked. "Yep," Elias said. "No glow, but we make up for it with something called pizza." "What's pizza?" another child asked. Elias launched into an animated description, complete with exaggerated gestures, much to the children's delight. Lyra watched from a distance, her expression unreadable. As the celebration wound down, Lyra joined Elias at the edge of the clearing, where the stars were beginning to emerge. "You handled yourself well tonight," she said. "Thanks," Elias said, "though I think the kids like me more than the adults do." "Give it time," Lyra said. "You're growing on them, slowly." Elias chuckled. "I'll take it." They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of the day settling over them. "You know," Elias said, breaking the quiet, "this isn't exactly how I imagined my first off-world mission going, but I think I'm okay with that." Lyra glanced at him, her gaze thoughtful. "Sometimes the unexpected paths are the most meaningful." Elias smiled. "You're starting to sound like your mom." "Don't push your luck," Lyra said, though her tone was more amused than annoyed. As the stars twinkled overhead, Elias felt a strange sense of contentment. For the first time since arriving on Artraxia, he wasn't just an outsider. He was part of something bigger, something that, against all odds, he was starting to embrace. Elias sat cross-legged on the mossy ground, staring at the sky. The stars above Artraxia didn't just twinkle. They pulsed and shifted, forming intricate patterns that seemed to dance to some unseen rhythm. He'd spent weeks on this planet, but the sight never got old. Beside him, Lyra fidgeted with a small device resembling a crystal calculator. It was a gift from the council, a token of their tentative approval. Elias had taken to calling it the marriage meter, which earned him a death glare from Lyra every time. "You've been unusually quiet," Lyra said, breaking the silence. "I'm just thinking," Elias replied. "Dangerous territory for you," she quipped, but her tone was light. He chuckled. "Fair. But seriously, I've been reflecting. When I first landed here, I thought I was just another scientist on a routine expedition. Collect samples, write a report, maybe discover some new species of moss. I never imagined I'd be caught in an intergalactic culture clash or an accidental engagement." Lyra smirked. "You're welcome, by the way." "For what?" "For making your boring little mission interesting," she said, tossing the crystal device between her hands. "Admit it, you'd miss me if you left." Elias opened his mouth to argue, but he stopped himself. The truth was, she was right. Somewhere between the sabotaged drones, the culinary near-deaths, and the bizarre trials of compatibility, Lyra had become more than just a reluctant companion. The sound of footsteps interrupted his thoughts. Nara and Chief Orlin approached, their imposing figures silhouetted by the village's glowing lights. "Elias," Nara began, her tone measured, "it is time to discuss your future here." Elias swallowed hard. "Right. No pressure." Orlin's expression was stern, but there was a hint of warmth in his eyes. "You have proven yourself more adaptable than we expected, and despite the initial resistance, you have begun to earn the trust of our people." "Thanks," Elias said, unsure if it was a compliment or a backhanded remark. Nara continued, "The council has decided to offer you a choice. You may remain here, as part of our community, or return to your world. Either way, the bond you have formed with Lyra will not be dissolved lightly. If you choose to stay, the union will be formalized." Elias blinked. "Formalized? As in, an official wedding?" Lyra groaned. "Don't make it weird." "Too late," Elias muttered, but his mind was racing. Later that night, Elias wandered the village, trying to make sense of his options. Staying on Artraxia would mean embracing an entirely new life, one filled with challenges, but also possibilities he'd never imagined. Returning to Earth would mean resuming his old routine, where the most exciting part of his day was arguing with a university grant committee. He paused by the heart of Artraxia, its soft glow illuminating the clearing. The obelisk seemed to hum in response to his presence, as if waiting for his decision. "Still torn?" Lyra's voice broke the silence. He turned to see her leaning casually against a tree, arms crossed. "Yeah," he admitted. "It's not exactly an easy choice." Lyra nodded, her expression unusually serious. "For what it's worth, I think you'd do fine here. Annoying, but fine." "High praise," he said, grinning. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of the decision hanging between them. "Why me?" Elias asked suddenly. "Out of all the people who could have crash-landed here, why did it have to be me?" Lyra shrugged. "Maybe the universe has a sense of humor, or maybe you're just lucky." Elias laughed. "Lucky, huh? I'll remember that the next time I'm dangling over a pit of carnivorous moss." Lyra smirked. "If you survive long enough, you might even get good at it." And the next morning, the entire village gathered in the central square. The council stood on the elevated stage, flanked by Nara and Orlun. Elias stood at the base of the platform, Lyra by his side. Nara raised her hand, silencing the crowd. "Today, we witness the culmination of an extraordinary journey. Elias, a visitor from a distant world, has proven himself resourceful, resilient, and willing to learn. He now stands at a crossroads." The crowd murmured, their glowing eyes fixed on Elias. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of their expectations. "I've made my decision," he said, his voice steady. "When I first arrived here, I thought I was just an outsider, a scientist observing from a distance. But over time I've realized something. I don't want to just observe. I want to be part of something bigger. And this feels like home." The crowd erupted into cheers, their collective glow intensifying. Lyra looked at him, her expression unreadable. "You're sure about this?" she asked. "Absolutely," Elias said, smiling. "Besides, who else is going to keep you out of trouble?" Lyra rolled her eyes. "You've got that backward, Earthman." And the formal ceremony was a blur of lights, music, and alien traditions that Elias didn't entirely understand. But he didn't mind. For the first time in his life, he felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. As the celebration continued into the night, Elias found himself standing at the edge of the village, gazing at the stars. "You did good," Lyra said, joining him. "Thanks," he said. "You weren't so bad yourself," she smirked. "Don't let it go to your head." They stood in silence, the stars reflecting in their eyes. "So," Elias said, "what happens now?" Lyra shrugged. "Whatever we want. This is just the beginning." Elias smiled, feeling a strange mix of excitement and contentment. For the first time, he wasn't worried about the future. He was ready for it. And as the stars above Artraxia continued their endless dance, Elias knew one thing for certain. He was exactly where he was meant to be.